get started. This, as some of you might know, is the second Edge Lane Forum, the second of two that was commissioned by the Aquinnah Planning Board as part of an island transportation engineering resource that the MV Commission manages. And we have Michaela Saran from Howard Stein Hudson, who's our engineer tonight. And she joined us in early October up at the Aquinnah Town Hall. We had a real spirited conversation and informative, learning about how edge lane roads operate, which we'll be starting to get into in a few moments. But I just wanted to give folks the background and thank you for taking time tonight. A rainy night. I don't know what you'd be doing otherwise, but thanks for tuning in nonetheless. Tonight we'll do a couple things. We're going to explain how edge lane roads work, show some applications in other parts of New England, as well as address some of the items that surfaced and that we talked through at the October 6th conversation at the old town hall. But first, before we get into any of that, I would just love to hear from any kids who are here, if they use the roads, how they use the roads, what their experiences are like, and while that's happening, if other folks in attendance, the older kids, the adults, if they could just drop into the chat, some of the ways they use the roads as well, that would be really great. So if there are any kids who might be willing to chime in and maybe tell us if they use the roads and what they do on them, that would be great.
Say hi, Stein. Hi, it's Tilly.
Hi, Tilly.
I use the roads through one wheeling. When I one wheel, sometimes I one wheel down to the bike ferry in the summertime. And also I bike down there sometimes just for fun. Well, that's one way that I use the road. What else did I have?
No, those are two ways, two good ways.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Tilly. Hope to see you out there this spring. Since we have a small enough group, would anyone else like to, just pipe up and tell us how, if they use the roads? I think we have a fairly big Up Island crowd. I think that's our contingent tonight primarily, but I recognize the name of someone who might be tuning in off island as well. Anyone else want to contribute?
Well, we were up there biking today. So hit West Basin Road. I'm Mike Broderick, and this is Mary McConnell, my wife.
Hello.
And just happy to be in on the chat. Just wanted to see where you guys were at. We missed the first meeting, so just catching up a little bit. And we're enthusiastic to hear that there's some planning going into into the sides of the roads, because we find ourselves there a lot on the bikes. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Mike.
Right.
And was it Mary?
Mary, yeah.
Yes, hello.
Hi, nice to meet you both.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks,
too.
Dan.
Right.
Hey,
This is really cool.
this is Willie.
I
I use the roads for like one wheeling, like biking, and I think like it'd be great to have it on like lots, like on a safe road and without like that much cars going by. So I would think like Lobster Hill Road would be a good place to do it.
All right, thanks, Willie. Willie, for those of us who aren't familiar with the one wheels, are those electric or gas powered? How do they work?
They're battery powered.
Okay.
And it's like it kind of just like stabilizes you. It's like a skateboard, just with like one wheel in the middle, and it keeps you balanced. And I would say be probably a good spot if you just made a bike pack there.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right, like that big fat tire in the middle. Okay, thanks, Willie. That's great. Thanks for joining us tonight. Well, with that, let's get right into it. I'm going to turn it over to Michaela, who has some slides, some visuals to show you. She'll talk through how some of the roads work, in concept, and also some video footage of not only what the roads in question that we'll be talking about tonight, what it looks like to drive along them, but also some video, what this looks like, a short animation, as well as some footage from a place where it's presently, implemented up in New Hampshire. All right, Michaela, thanks for being here again tonight.
All right, thanks, Dan. So as Dan said, my name is Michaela Savrin. I work for Hudson. I'm a traffic engineer. And so just getting right into it, this is, as Dan mentioned, the second of two forums we had regarding the edge lane roads. So for those of you who attended the first, the next few slides might be a little familiar, but for those of you who are new or might just want a little refresher, we're going to talk through what our project goals are and then give a little bit of education on what edge lane roads are and how they function. So some goals of this project are to educate you, the public, on a new type of roadway configuration, to provide space for all users on a road in the Lobsterville area to improve comfortability and safety for all users. And then also we're trying to evaluate the effectiveness of this type of roadway configuration for potential future projects across the island if this were to be implemented. So you might be here and say, what is an edge lane road? So an edge lane road, or an ELR, which it might be referred to as later in the presentation, it's a shared roadway first and foremost. It provides pedestrian and bike accommodations without the need to widen the footprint of the road, which is a big part of these locations that we're looking at. So basically what you see here, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but there's a singular center lane with two edge lanes on either side. And so the center lane has vehicles traveling in both directions, and each edge lane shows is where pedestrians and bikes can operate. And the basics behind this is that the user in front has the right of way. When two cars are coming at each other, they come into the edge lanes to pass. But if there's a bike in the edge lane, the vehicle has to yield to the bike or the pedestrian. I'll mention it a little later, but in the first forum, there was questions on how someone with an e-bike or a moped might use this road, and I guess how someone on a one wheel might use it. So theoretically, mopeds should be driving in the center lane. Whether they do or don't, that's up to them. But basically, it's about who has the right of way, so who's in front. If there's a moped coming up here and a car has to yield to another car coming, it's whoever's in front has the right of way. So just a quick little video that we found. It is from Canada, so it has metrics, but we thought this was a nice short condensed way to explain how an ELR works.
Ottawa is about to be one of the first cities in Canada with advisory cycling lanes. Popular in Europe and in the US, the system is great for adding cycling lanes to streets where they wouldn't otherwise fit. Narrow roads with low volume traffic and low. Here's how they work. Traffic from both sides share one center lane. Cycling lanes are placed on each side of the road. When there are two drivers traveling in opposite directions, the vehicles move into the cycling lanes to pass each other safely. What happens if there's a bike in the cycling lane? Whoever is in front has the right of way. Vehicles travel behind the bike, but can then move back into the center lane when it is safe to do so. It is a whole new way for drivers and cyclists to share the road. Find out more at ottawa.ca.
So that was just a quick little intro to what ELRs are. They're also called advisory bike lanes, but in this sense, we're calling them edge lane road, mainly because it's not just for bikes, it's for pedestrians as well. So just going through a little bit of feedback we got from the first forum, we kind of looked at these as the main takeaways and concerns that we got. And so those included the desire to look into West Basin Road instead of Lobsterville Road. So as you'll see a little bit later, we looked into both Lobsterville Road and West Basin. There was concern about the width of Lobsterville Road as it's a pretty narrow roadway. There was also a desire for a rough estimated cost for the ELR for both Lobsterville Road and West Basin. And so you'll see that later on in the presentation as well. And as I mentioned a couple slides ago, concern on how e-bikes and mopeds would use it. So going right into it, this is just an aerial view of Lobsterville Road where we would propose this ELR.
Mhm.
And so we're just gonna, this is an aerial, and then we can look through a quick video of the location if you're unfamiliar with the road. So right here is West Basin Road as we're passing it, and then there's just a nice straightaway of Lobsterville Road. And then moving on, as I said, following the first forum, there was desire for us to look into an ELR treatment on West Basin Road. This road is just under a mile long compared to Lobsterville Road, which is about a fifth of a mile. And we did check the site distances to make sure that the treatment could be installed safely. So this would go right from the Lobsterville Road intersection to the parking lot right by the bike ferry. And then just once again, a quick video to show if you're unfamiliar with the area. So this is while you're on Lobsterville Road, and then this will show driving through West Basin Road.
And Michaela will show you this in a cross section, but I don't know if you can tell with the naked eye, but this is, wider. It's a wider
Yes.
dimension than Lobsterville. Lobsterville was between 17 and 17 and a half for that 1/5 of a mile segment. And West Basin is between 19 feet and 20 feet width of pavement.
Right. So definitely more space to work with. This video takes a bit longer because it's a longer stretch of road, but it is great to see these long stretches.
And similar to Lobsterville, you'll see this little margin that is typically, mowed fairly routinely on the sides. Which pedestrians currently use to, step off sometimes and could still do so with any potential treatment.
Almost there. All right, so next we're just gonna look at kind of some comparisons between the two. So first we're gonna talk about Lobsterville Road, some pros and cons to putting an ELR on Lobsterville Road. So some pros are the pristine sight lines. It is a straightaway, so you can see everything in front of you. There's slower speeds on these roadways. There's low vehicular volumes, and it's a more affordable option to the West Basin Road ELR. Also, Red Sand Beach will have the opportunity as like a gathering space to be used as a location to educate users via signage and things like that. Some of the cons, as you can see here, the edge lanes are 3.5 feet and the shared lane is 10 feet. We did look into narrowing that shared lane after our first forum because there was concern about how narrow the edge lanes were. So we were looking into a 9-foot shared lane and 4 feet on either side. We did find that there were similar treatments in Massachusetts that went as narrow as 3 feet. And the main reason that we decided to keep it at 10 feet in the center instead of giving more space to the edge lane was because we saw that delivery trucks that go down here wouldn't fit in the 9-foot shared lane, and we'd rather not give a false sense of security to people in those edge lanes if they thought that they're in their edge lanes and a car wouldn't hit them. To have a vehicle that can't even fit within that shared lane was a concern for us. And then another con of Lobsterville Road is that because it's a 1/5 of a mile, it might not be as informative as a longer stretch of roadway. And then going into West Basin Road.
It's kind of dumb.
So going into West Basin Road. So some of the pros, as Dan mentioned, at its narrowest, it's 19 feet wide, which is much wider than the 17 feet that we have for Lobsterville Road. And that makes it more comparable to many other ELRs that are out there today. There's more multimodal traffic along the roadway because of the bike ferry. And it's almost a mile long stretch of road. So there's a lot more room to work with. Similar to Lobsterville Road, it does have lower vehicular volumes, and it has the launch lot and bike ferry operators that can be used to educate users. The cons is that it's more expensive than the Lobsterville Road option. And there are also larger vehicles that travel along the roadway. So now that we've looked at some graphics and seen some animation on how edge lane roads operate, this is going to give you a chance to see some actual footage from one of the roads in northern New England. This is a current functioning ELR in New Hampshire.
And this is near Dartmouth College as well,
Yes.
not that far from the campus.
Downtown Hanover is a compact mix of businesses, restaurants, and opportunities for shopping. Directly adjacent is Dartmouth College. East of these two major destinations lies the core of in-town Hanover housing, all within walking and biking distance. Valley Road sees comparatively less traffic than other routes into town and serves the town as a collector street for pedestrians and cyclists. This portion of Valley Road has the advisory lanes painted on it. Valley Road currently has advisory lanes, a shared street concept that gives equal priority to vehicles and other road users. The road has one center lane for cars and two shoulders, indicated by dashed lines, that pedestrians and cyclists share. Let's take a look at how it works. Cars and trucks on Valley Road share the center lane. When no bikes or walkers are present, two cars coming from opposite directions move into the shoulders to pass each other. Once they've passed, they move back into the center lane. When a car passes bicycles, the car can stay in the center lane, However, the car can also move into the opposite shoulder to give the bikers more room. This shows the perspective of a person walking against traffic. Here are some bikes passing the pedestrian in the shared travel lane. Cars wait their turn to use the road. Now that the bikes have passed the pedestrian, the cars can pass. This time, the car has time to pass when reaching the pedestrian. Then the oncoming car waits for the bikes to pass the walker. Now pedestrians are on both sides of the street with a car using the center lane. The shoulders allow for pedestrians to feel that the road is a shared space. The cars are also sharing the road and move to the side for the pedestrian using the shoulder. The advisory lane concept is a cost-effective means of creating a shared street space. It has worked well on Valley Road to create a space that welcomes all users. The Valley Road advisory lanes have been on the road for 2 years now, and the public response has been overwhelmingly positive. The road has seen a modest increase in pedestrian and bike travel since their installation.
All right, so going into the next steps, the planning board will discuss the outcome of these 2 forums that we've had. They'll decide if implementation is desired and if there's a preferred roadway. And then also for your consideration, the construction costs are, this is a pretty rough estimate, would be around $25,000 for Lobsterville Road and $60,000 for West Basin Road. So this is including the pavement marking removal, the new pavement markings, and then the signage. But it's important to note that this is kind of, if this project lived in a bubble, there's a potential for savings if it's done through a shared contract with the other island towns. And I think Dan could kind of go more into that. But otherwise, I think we can open it up to questions after Dan talks.
Thanks, Michaela. And I'm gonna, start going around the room, but just wanted to give a little more context that I did not include up front. So to elaborate on the savings component, and maybe we can go back to the gallery format, Michaela, if you stop the screen share. The efficiencies with that shared contract, they would not be, triggered by virtue of other towns also doing edge lane roads. That's not really what we're talking about, but simply some of the striping work that needs to happen routinely, some of the, scrubbing off of old paint that takes place that drives up costs. Those are the types of things that the towns have collaborated on to, just realize some efficiencies and economies of scale when a vendor comes out to do that type of work. So Aquinnah is part of that. I had a chance to speak with Jay Smalley of Aquinnah today, who is closely involved with that. And this is a reminder for some who were able to attend in early October, but maybe new for others. one of the reasons the planning board wanted to look at this type of treatment is because, our up island roads, our rural roads, they're not, sometimes they're carving right through very fragile ecology, right? Vegetation that we really treasure and want to preserve, keep it intact. We don't even want to have the conversation about clear cutting, through some of these wetlands and some of those areas, that is really a trapping of the Lobsterville part of Aquinnah. So this is simply an alternative without mixing a single, barrel of cement or any kind of concrete, right? That you're not widening the road, but it's a treatment that prioritizes pedestrians, it prioritizes and gives some preference to the slower user, slows down vehicular speeds, and just simply kind of acknowledges that there's mixed and many users on the roads, and that the roads are, they're right of ways for everyone in town to use, and allows cars to still effectively use them, because we're not talking about really high volumes. We're not talking about very high speeds. The type of treatment that Michaela described would not work, on state road per se, because of the amount of traffic that goes through and the speeds that take place. But in certain kind of situations where the speeds are low enough, the volumes of cars and users are low enough, it is a potential to consider. So that's just some additional backstory that I think is important for folks to know. But with that, let's open it up. I think a question or two arrived in the chat. Is there a plan to educate drivers on how to navigate the roadways once they've received treatment? Yeah, that's a great question. And actually that type of education would need to happen, or we think, it's best timed and sequenced to happen even before the treatment, right? So people become aware of that. And, the parking lots offer some opportunity. We obviously nobody likes to clutter the, pristine areas with signage. That being said, there is some targeted signage that I think would be important as you approach certain key intersections, that would really be important, because, everybody recognizes this is not anything conventional. It's, even though it's there's plenty of other precedent, it's not something that's routine and people are necessarily accustomed to. So absolutely, on the education part, I think even the steamship could be leveraged on that count, because we realize, there's a seasonal contingent and there's newcomers arriving every year. So that would be an important part. And we've heard from other communities that they've been more successful when they've kind of committed to that and had a kind of an intentional dissemination and education effort. Isaac.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for being here, everybody. I saw this as an interesting opportunity for us as a town to think about ways to get people outside and enjoying our roads and enjoying our town in ways that are safe and effective. And it seems that that could be an opportunity for us to look at this and say, yeah, this would be a benefit for our town, and it would bring people out onto the street in different ways than just being in the car. And I thought that's an interesting way to look forward to the planning of the possible planning of our town, with that focus in mind. And as an exercise, this has been great because we've all learned a bit about edge lane roads. Whether or not it's going to be effective and work, we don't really know yet. But it'd be nice to know whether or not it would be effective anywhere else on the island, so that because if it was just for this one little mile, and that's really the only place on the island where it would work well, it would be great for us if that's the case. But still, it seems like I'm wondering whether or not this could be something that might be a benefit to the island in other places. And I also wanted to ask Mike Broderick, who I think has been familiar with the effect that these have in communities. I think you've had some experience riding on them. And because I thought it'd be nice to know how the people that live in these places or utilize them, you know, how they feel.
Yeah, I just think that it looks like a great plan in other parts of the world that we've been privileged to ride and you know, travel on the bikes. It just seems like the best way to integrate a safer cycling and pedestrian use area without making drastic alterations to the road, or really any alterations other than the surface painting. Yeah, it really looks like what I was hoping to see tonight. And I think that also, as far as utilizing it in other places on the island, certainly you'd want to use it in places that are lower speed, you know, not, you know, 45 miles per hour maybe, but in certain instances, it could actually sort of be like a variance, like as in if there was a climb or a part that was really slow on the road for cyclists, that would be like possibly like a paint strip on the side there that could indicate the same sort of, you know, feasibility of cars staying away from the bike at that point. And, but I think in general, there'll be a lot of information gathered from this initial, you know, the initial pilot plan up in Aquinnah. And I think looks really good. I think that's the most successful way to integrate it into a community that isn't, you know, taking away from the natural environment, and it's offering a safer area for pedestrians. So really happy to see it go in this direction. So
Thanks for that input, Mike. And I want to respond to a couple things you said, Isaac. But before, I think someone needed to peel away. There was one Michael Kudransky who added in the chat, it looks great. In the future, those cars will be electric golf carts. That's the national trend. I hope people endorse this plan. Thanks for adding that, Mike. And this is a good reminder. Isaac mentioned this is a chance to see if something would work, and that's something that I should have underscored before, which is, you know, this is not building the Taj Mahal, right? And if you change your mind, you like it, you need to dismantle it. There'd be a chance to do a trial period, a pilot stretch where some formal evaluation could take place. And those services exist, you know, here at your regional planning agency. MVC does that sometimes when towns request it. But anyway, the point being, if it's something people didn't like, you know, it's not all that difficult to turn back the clock on it. I'm not trivializing the cost involved, but relative to some other potential infrastructure, I mean, there's a half-mile bike path that's being constructed. You probably see it in Oak Bluffs from the drawbridge to County Road. It's a $4 million project. You know, relatively speaking, this is a far more modest cost. But Isaac, yes, there are other roads, you know, that kind of, I would say, fit within the confines and the parameters. Hopefully you can see this little chart up here. And this is just kind of kind of a working use of the numbers. When you look at vehicular volume on the left here, you know, that y-axis, and then the x-axis looking at the motor vehicle speeds where it typically works. And there are other variables that certainly do matter, right? You wouldn't want to put this on the most serpentine road on the island, right? Where there's blind curves every 400 feet. You wouldn't want to do that. But you also don't need to entirely exclude a road that has a challenging sight line. There are things to do that can help open up a sight line. There are also things you can do when the sight line isn't quite as distant as you would like it to be, to help slow cars down as they approach those bends in the road or those blind rises. So we don't need to get into that right now, because that's not really an issue here on the stretch of West Basin or Lobsterville that we're talking about. But just wanted you to see that, you know, these are kind of, this is just a helpful chart to see, okay, there are other roads where we're far below this 6,000 motor vehicle, volume. I mean, that's state road, right? That's the busiest road in Aquinnah, is not even there on most days. So yes, there are other potential applications. All right, let's open it up again. Any other comments, concern, curiosity, reactions?
I have something to say. I think that it's a great idea, and our experience of seeing this side edge road was in Ireland, and it was a kind of a busy area with a lot of homes and people and traffic, but everybody adhered perfectly just to the person in front who had the right of way, whether it was a cyclist or somebody walking, or we had a very large vehicle that we were driving down the road, and we didn't have a problem whatsoever waiting for the point to pass. So I feel like what you guys are doing or looking at for out in Aquinnah is an excellent idea, and I can see it happening on more sections of the island as well. It was something that we noticed years ago in our travels, and I just think that this is a great start, and I'm very excited to see this happen.
And that's I'm glad you mentioned that. We had a chance to speak with the DPW the Department of Public Work director in Hanover, and he kind of mentioned, that people adjusted really quickly. That it actually was just sort of formalizing what's already taking place with the double center line. People know that two cars and a pedestrian are not going to all fit on the pavement at once, and they do just what is being kind of prompted, through this new striping. It just kind of, again, sends that signal for who gets the preference and priority. We got a big crowd here. Miles, Alethea, Eddie, Nanette, go ahead.
Okay, you're on.
Hi guys, it's Alethea. I wanted to just say that I really appreciate this plan as an example for what might happen in other spots on the island, because there's lots of folks that I see. I'm a primary care doctor on the island. There's lots of folks I see on the island that aren't getting out and walking and getting really important exercise they need because you don't have enough walkable spaces, especially for elders, somebody with a walker, somebody who has an ambulatory dysfunction, all sorts of things. So I think that's really important to just sort of think of this as really, it's also sort of a health initiative to have a walkable community. So I appreciate all this work.
Thank you, Dr. Donahue. I had the good fortune of working with Healthy Aging Martha's Vineyard, and a number of the board members and folks involved, they are the directors of councils on aging here on the island. And they often hear, reported back from some of their members who get implored by their children to get out and be more active, especially with COVID, they were spending even more time at home. Yet on the other side of that coin is, there needs to be a safe kind of place right outside the door for those who are not planning to drive somewhere. Like you said, there needs to be a safe option to go out, and feel confident and feel that, they're not in a kind of hazardous situation. Morgan, hi.
Hi. Thanks a lot for this presentation and for the additional work that you guys have done. I was at the first one, and as you remember, my main comments were that, well, I thought it was a good idea. I was concerned about the width of that little stretch of Lobsterville Road. We live there, and so we use it all the time, and it just seemed to me that that was both too short for a really good test and too narrow, a narrow roadway for a good example of how it would work. I think that the option of West Basin would be a great test and would be a perfectly good thing for us to try. I can't speak to the, I see you've got a member of the select board on. I can't speak to the cost issue about where, you know, where we would come up with $60,000 for that. But I think moving it to West Basin was a great option that you brought forward now, and I would think it'd be a great thing to try.
Thanks, Morgan. And yeah, thanks for circling back the second time around. And I think that was a really helpful or constructive outcome of that first meeting, you know, is we weren't necessarily, we were trying to think of the simplest, shortest stretch. But I think through that conversation, you know, we heard that, all right, if we're going to try this, let's try it in a way where it's truly revealing and there's actually some meaningful takeaways that people can pay attention to and learn from. And maybe a fifth of a mile is, you know, just a little too fleeting. It's over before it even begins, really. That's helpful. Yeah, and as far as the costs go, I mean, you know, it's been a running conversation with Howard Stein Hudson, because we worked with them for the past several years and really want to be grounded in a realistic cost estimate. So if anything, I'm hoping this would represent the higher end of the cost, you know, and that could certainly get probed further, but we just wanted to have kind of an order of magnitude cost that folks could, you know, understand. Chief Boulain.
Hi. Again, like Morgan said, thank you for revisiting this and looking into West Basin after that first session we had. Getting just for the cost, I don't remember, doesn't the commission have something to do with grants? I don't know if they're still offered, but wasn't each town, like you would tell the commission what, like a road project that the town was interested in, and wasn't something coming from DOT through grant wise? Is that still an option that's out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. There is a process every year, a program called the Transportation Improvement Program. You might hear
That's it. That's what I'm thinking about.
As the TIP. Yeah, and we get over $1 million, or get roughly $1 million each year now. The money, most of the money comes down from federal highway. And there's a joint transportation committee on the island. Every town has a representative. And we have a 5-year lookout where we program projects for each year and plug in projects. Sometimes the cost is so much that they spill over into 2 years. But that committee votes and prioritizes projects, you know, based on certain criteria. Those dollars have been spent on town-owned roads in addition to state-owned roads. So I wouldn't want to dismiss it outright. I don't know quite how high it would score, just given some of the criteria they look at to rank the projects. But nonetheless, it is worth keeping in mind. We're also going through a 4-year regional transportation plan, which gets updated at that kind of cadence. And that will be coming up in the next year to 18 months, where we look out about 20 years and kind of compile a running list of potential TIP projects as well. So some of this kind of innovative pilot projects could definitely be, you know, something within that realm, for sure. And there are other grants that, you know, could potentially be considered. It's just a little, you know, a little bit of a nascent type of treatment that there's nothing we could say for certain, you know, it falls within. Michaela, you know, if at any point, please jump in and you know, add to my responses. You know, if you feel like I'm not covering everything.
Sounding good to me so far.
All right, great. Miles.
Hey, I think that last question kind of answered what was similar to what we were asking, right? We were wondering who's paying for, is like the town of Aquinnah going to be responsible for the cost of this? And it's, you kind of touched on that a little bit. And the other thing is, what are the hurdles to getting this done now? Like, does Aquinnah have the town of Aquinnah, like the selectmen have the final say on whether or not to do this, or is it already been approved and we're just like hammering out whether or not to do it? What if everyone in this meeting where like we think it's a terrible idea, like will this happen anyway, or you know?
Miles, the audio is cutting out. But what I think I heard you ask is, what are the hurdles to pulling this off? And what sort of approvals maybe would be needed to actually,
Yeah,
advance it?
who gets the final say on whether or not this happens? You know, is it the town of Aquinnah or who?
Yeah, so we have a select board member here. We have a planning board member as well. As I understand it, and they can set the record straight, the way this project was sort of commissioned was the planning board made a recommendation and the select board, considered that, and they then chose to support it. So I would imagine maybe something, I don't know, I'll stop there. I don't know if that would also apply to, per se, committing funds for engineering work, right? To do the designs for the work, which would be a interim step before construction. So I think the planning board will circle back and kind of assess what these conversations were and decide if they would like to, recommend one of those two roads. Isaac, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I'm only guessing here, but as a member of the planning board, I think we would probably, if it turned out that we think that it would be a good idea, then it would be a recommendation that we would give to the select board, recommending that we give it a try, at which point I would guess it would go to the town floor, to town meeting. But I'm not sure about that. They may be able to make the decision without the town meeting. But Tom, I'm not sure if you know more about that than I do.
I'm sorry. Good evening, and I'm sorry I was late to the call. Thanks, Dan. I'm not sure, Isaac, but it sounds logical that the planning board would make a recommendation to the select board. I don't know if it would necessarily go to town meeting, but that may be the case.
I guess if there were funds allocated to it, it would have to go to the floor. But my guess, though, is that funds could be raised. I think if it turns out that this could be a benefit for the community in the way that I see it as a possibility, it seems to me that funding could be generated through all the towns and fundraising through the island. So I don't know about funding, but that's the issue, I think, for the town floor anyway.
That would, hopefully.
I have another question. I think from the first form, we said that in Massachusetts, there wasn't an ELR anywhere. Is that true? And the reason I'm asking that is I'm assuming that it's legal to do this as far as the way that the markings are on the passing and whatnot, what have you. I mean, I don't know that personally, but I would assume that it must be if it's would be a consideration, but
Yeah, so
Michaela must know that.
there are a couple in Cambridge right now, and all of the markings that would be done would be to standard, to code, all of that, and it is considered a shared road, and as long as the markings are done correctly, then it is perfectly legal to do.
So thank you.
Yep.
I noticed I see a familiar name Greg Politz, who I think is the owner of a bike shop down Island. If you're in earshot, Greg, do you have any, just kind of refrains or mantras you hear from cyclists coming in who want to get up Island, and what their experience is and the guidance that you give them, based on the conditions?
Hello, everybody. Good evening. So I haven't really talked to many people who have ridden a road like this personally. I think most of us are intrigued by it and excited about Aquinnah wanted to go out on the ledge and try something, be our guinea pigs. We're all very thankful. Because I think there is a lot of potential, and having it be more slower vehicle friendly from all the way from the bike ferry to the traffic circle, to the Aquinnah circle, it would be a dream. We could get a lot of vehicles, a lot of bikes off of State Road, and that would be great. So yeah, I salute the project and support it fully.
Thanks, Greg. So what have we overlooked? What should, are there any other, things folks are curious about that we haven't covered? Any other questions that we should make sure to account for? And if they can't be answered tonight, I can also get back to the planning board with, more detail, more clarification.
Not that it's a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but that stretch on West Basin, there is one little kind of curve there, blind curve, kind of as you start going down there. I don't know if we saw it when they were showing the video, but it's just that it's one little glitch area that I'd be a little concerned about with you not being able to see the car coming the other way. Because I know when I've tried to go around people or bikes in that one area, it's kind of been a little dicey because you don't know what's coming the other way, but it's just a real small stretch.
So I was actually surprised because I, had that question as well. And when we went out and measured the sight lines, the guidance we got from Michaela's team was we wouldn't want to find, we'd like it to be 300 feet sight line or more. That's preferred. And Michaela, you add on to this. So it was at least 400 everywhere, if not far more, except for the one little stretch near the launch parking lot itself. I don't know if that's the end you were referring to, Chief. But that was right around 300. And Michaela, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I had Dan go out there because we wanted to make sure that this would work. And with the sight lines, it seems like everything should be visible to up to standards, I guess. But if there is a spot that people are concerned about, there are different treatments you can do. It's not as ideal because you kind of break apart the treatment. But there are certain ways where you can either bring the bikes back onto a shared space with two-way traffic going, or there's a few other different treatments that have been using these. So as we get into the design, if there is a specific location that people are concerned about, then we can look into that further.
And I thought you made a good point earlier in the week when you and I spoke too about, or maybe it was last week, where the shorter the sight line, the slower you want people traveling at that given, section in the space. So the good news is that that area where it is right around that 300-foot mark, that's also an area, it's not where people are maxing out their speed on that road. They're approaching the parking lot or they're leaving the parking lot, which is, that in and of itself will help kind of moderate the speed they're traveling at that particular, curve.
Okay, you answered my question. Thank you.
All right.
Just one more quick question, or comment, maybe both. It seems like that those cost estimates were higher than I'd anticipated, and I just think before too. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is it'd be nice to know actually more definitively what it would cost. I mean, if that $60,000 is actually accurate, or if there's ways to do it that would be even cheaper than that. But
yes,
it would be nice for us to be able to take that to the next step.
So the majority of the cost of this project, which is take it or leave it, is the removal of the pavement markings that are out there today, because that's a big issue with this kind of road. You don't want any sight of that center line, because that's just going to cause some major confusion. And with a mile stretch of road, it's a lot to remove. So that's where the majority of the cost comes. And in addition to that, the reason I think that it's so much more expensive than I kind of expected either is the past year or so, prices for things have skyrocketed. We've seen our estimates double in some cases. So while it is a rough estimate, it's not that far off, I don't think.
And I'm not racing ahead too far with this, but it would be helpful to know, Michaela, if your team has a sense of, do some communities actually opt to procure a piece of equipment that can be actually fairly easily operated? Who knows? If the equipment's $15,000 and the cost to do it is $35,000, with an off-island company, it would just be a good, it would be a good fit, good thing to be aware of, I guess.
Yeah, we can look into that.
Are there some kind of more local measures that are ever taken to scrub the paint off roads? I just don't know. I can't imagine it's easy, but nonetheless, it's something to be good to find out more about. I'll try to do some research as well. All right. Oh, Tom.
No, I
Oh, you're
I have-
saying,
I have a 7:30 call that I have to jump off to.
hey,
I was just apologizing. Thank you very much. A good presentation. I'm glad to hear that many of our people are very supportive. I'll withhold my opinion until it comes in front of the select board, but I'm a biker, so
all right.
you get the drift. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you for taking the time and being
Thank
here,
you.
Tom. All right.
My
Bye for
pleasure.
now.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.